Electronic Arts has made a lot of good football games over the years, and a lot of money, but they've never made a football game as fun as the ones they supplanted. Before Madden had the market cornered, there wasn't a better football game than TECMO Bowl. And if you ask some of us, there still isn't. And so it's for the old schoolers, those of us who prefer fast and fun arcade gameplay to lifelike animations and realistic strategies. The TECMO has finally returned to the gridiron. It's not to challenge the division leader or anything, but it's to make one last run at the end zone, to throw one more pass to fans who have been open since 1990-freaking-1. This is TECMO Bowl Kickoff. And when it comes to this game, there are two very clearly defined crowds. There are those who were around back when zigging and zagging up the field was the best way to avoid tackles, dropping back 20 yards was actually a way to throw a football further, and these strategies were common football knowledge. And there's a younger generation, raised on the idea that a football video game should be as close to a television broadcast as possible. Whether you like this game or not depends almost entirely upon which side of the ball you line up on, so to speak. But personally, this is the most fun I've had with a football game since Thurman Thomas. And no one zigged and zagged up the field better than Thurman Thomas. Now, at its core, Kickoff is TECMO Bowl just as you remember it. Not much was changed for this reboot. Not much at all. And again, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Well, it all depends on your expectations. If you wanted a modern TECMO Bowl, well, this is about as modern as TECMO Bowl seems to get. But fortunately, the same design that worked in the late 80s also works today. Imagine that, arcade gameplay holding up. This is a timeless sort of game, TECMO Bowl, and there's a purity to Kickoff that makes it a very refreshing game to play. It's like the last 20 years of so-called advancements in sports games never happened, and to an extent, that's a good thing. The bad thing is that TECMO Bowl Kickoff, for all its faithfulness and purity, isn't a very polished game. There are a surprising amount of bugs and glitches. It's mostly minor stuff like the wrong names showing up on the screen after you edit them, but when you have as many minor issues as this game does, all those problems combine to leave a pretty bitter aftertaste. Especially for a game this simple, you'd expect things to be a bit more refined. But fortunately, that lack of polish and the stubborn refusal to modernize are just about the only criticisms I could make about Kickoff, and I'd argue the latter isn't even a bad thing necessarily. The game plays just as it did 20 years ago. And having a full TECMO season in your pocket, I mean, to me, that's more than worth the price of admission. Of course, there are some things about TECMO Bowl that had to change in a post-Madden world. So the NFL license, for example, that's off limits to TECMO, so Kickoff comes with a league of fake teams with generic names. And that's another criticism you could make about it, but fortunately, Kickoff allows you to edit every single aspect of the game. Like, everything. Team names, team colors, player names, it's all open for editing. So if you use some elbow grease, you can turn this fictional league into the NFL. It's like TECMO's way of getting around the problem, and frankly, it's a brilliant idea. You could say Kickoff is dated, and that's a fair criticism of its gameplay, but you could say the same thing about Pac-Man, and that game still freaking rules. And for all the old-school elements of the game's design, TECMO did add a few modern touches. You got the editor, the online mode, you can actually adjust the player's attributes in sort of an RPG-like element. I mean, Kickoff is the game of yesterday with just a little bit of today. And for me, that's more than enough to make it a DS game worth owning.
Quarterback set.